Why are some countries prosperous while others remain poor? Why do certain industries become highly productive? How do prices emerge, wages change, and businesses decide what to produce? In 1776, Scottish philosopher Adam Smith attempted to answer these questions in an inquiry into the nature and causes of the wealth of nations, commonly known as The Wealth of Nations. The book appeared during a period of enormous economic change. Manufacturing was expanding. International trade was growing. European governments competed for colonies, gold, and commercial influence. Powerful merchants sought protection from foreign rivals, while rulers imposed tariffs and granted monopolies. The dominant economic philosophy was mercantilism. Mercantilists often treated national wealth as a stock of gold and silver. They believed countries should export more than they imported, protect domestic producers, and accumulate precious metals. Smith challenged this view. A country's true wealth, he argued, lies in its ability to produce goods and services that improve people's lives. Gold has value, but it is not the purpose of economic activity. The purpose is consumption: food, clothing, shelter, tools, transportation, and everything else people use. Smith examined how specialization, exchange, competition, capital investment, wages, profits, rent, trade, and government policy shape economic development. His most famous idea is that individuals pursuing their own interests can sometimes promote the wider public interest without intending to do so. A baker does not produce bread mainly from kindness. The baker wants income. Customers want bread. Exchange allows both sides to benefit. Competition pressures the baker to offer acceptable quality at a reasonable price. This process is often associated with Smith's metaphor of the invisible hand. Yet Smith did not claim that self-interest always creates good results. Businesses may seek monopolies, influence government, restrict competition, suppress wages, and mislead the public. Markets require institutions, justice, competition, and public investment. Smith also recognized that economic growth can create social costs. Highly repetitive work may increase productivity, while weakening workers' intellectual development. Government therefore has responsibilities that private markets may not fulfill adequately. The wealth of nations is not a simple celebration of business or an argument that government should do nothing. It is an investigation into how prosperity is created, how economic power can be abused, and which institutions allow specialization and exchange to benefit society. Its central lesson is that nations become wealthier by improving productive capacity, encouraging useful exchange, investing capital wisely, and preventing privileged groups from manipulating the economy for their own benefit. Blink 1. A nation's wealth comes from production, not from hoarding gold. Mercantilist governments often measured national strength through stores of gold and silver. Because precious metals were used for international payments, rulers tried to increase exports and limit imports. If a country sold more abroad than it purchased, money would flow into the country. Smith argued that this confused money with wealth. Money helps people exchange goods, but it is not itself the final objective of production. A person with a chest full of gold but no access to food, shelter, or clothing is not truly prosperous. The same principle applies to a nation. Its living standards depend on how effectively it can produce useful goods and services. A country can become wealthier even when it imports more products, provided those imports improve productivity or give consumers valuable goods at lower cost. A machine purchased from abroad may allow domestic workers to produce far more. Imported food may release land and labor for activities in which the country is more productive. Smith therefore directs attention away from the amount of money held inside national borders and toward the annual output of society. How much can workers produce? How effectively is labor organized? How much capital supports production? Are resources moving toward useful activities? This view changed economic thinking. Trade was no longer simply a contest in which one country gained only when another lost. Two countries could benefit by exchanging products each could produce relatively effectively. Smith did not deny that national power, war, and security matter. He argued that ordinary economic policy should not treat consumption and imports as enemies. Production exists to serve human needs. The ultimate measure of prosperity is not the quantity of metal in government vaults, but the quantity, quality, and accessibility of goods people can use. Blink 2. Division of labor greatly increases productivity. Smith begins the wealth of nations with his famous example of a pin factory. One worker attempting to make an entire pin alone might produce very few pins in a day. Inside an organized factory, the process can be divided into separate tasks. One worker draws out the wire, another straightens it, another cuts it. Others sharpen the point, attach the head, or prepare the finished pins for sale. By specializing, a small group can produce thousands of pins per day. Smith identifies several reasons for this improvement. First, repeated practice increases skill. A worker performing one task becomes faster and more precise. Second, specialization reduces the time lost when switching between different activities. Third, dividing production into clear steps encourages the invention of tools and machines. When one task is repeated continuously, people are more likely to notice how it can be simplified or automated. The division of labor extends beyond the factory. Farmers produce food, builders construct homes, tailors make clothing, merchants move products between locations, teachers develop knowledge. Because individuals specialize, society produces far more than it could if every household attempted to make everything for itself. Specialization also creates dependence. A pin maker cannot survive on pins. The worker needs food, housing, clothing, and other goods produced by strangers. Exchange connects specialized activities into a functioning economy. Modern supply chains take this principle much further. A smartphone may depend on designers, software engineers, miners, chip manufacturers, shipping companies, retailers, and workers across several countries. No individual understands or performs the entire process. The product becomes possible through coordinated specialization. Smith's point is that prosperity is not created mainly by making each person work harder. It is created by organizing work so that knowledge, skill, machinery, and exchange multiply what each hour of labor can produce. Blink 3. Specialization expands when markets become larger. The division of labor has limits. A specialist needs enough customers to support specialized work. In a small village, one person may need to repair tools, build furniture, and perform several other tasks because demand for any single service is too limited. In a large city, one craftsperson can specialize in a narrow activity because thousands of possible customers exist. Smith summarizes this by arguing that the division of labor is limited by the extent of the market. Larger markets support deeper specialization. Transportation is therefore essential. A community connected by rivers, ports, and roads can sell products across a wider area. Manufacturers can produce at a larger scale. Workers can develop narrower skills. Consumers gain access to a greater variety of goods. Smith observed that early commercial development often occurred near waterways because ships could carry heavy products more cheaply than land transport. Modern infrastructure serves the same purpose. Highways, railways, container ports, telecommunications, and digital platforms expand the markets companies can reach. A software developer can serve customers worldwide. A small manufacturer can sell through an online marketplace. A farmer with access to efficient transportation can reach urban consumers rather than depending only on the local village. Market size also explains why trade can increase productivity. When foreign customers become available, domestic companies can produce on a larger scale and specialize further. However, a larger market does not guarantee that every firm will succeed. It brings more customers but also more competition. Companies must improve quality, price, and efficiency. Smith's argument connects infrastructure, trade, and productivity. Economic growth does not depend only on individual talent. A skilled worker trapped inside a tiny market may never specialize fully. Connect that worker to a wider network of exchange, and both production and opportunity can expand. Blink 4. Exchange is driven by self-interest, but it requires trust and cooperation. Smith argues that humans possess a strong tendency to trade and exchange. People rarely obtain what they need through generosity alone. Instead, they offer something valuable in return. Smith famously observes that people expect dinner not from the benevolence of the butcher, brewer, or baker, but from their concern for their own advantage. This statement is sometimes interpreted as a claim that selfishness is always good. Smith's meaning is narrower. Ordinary exchange works because each side considers what the other person wants. The customer wants bread. The baker wants payment. Neither must depend entirely on personal affection. A society can therefore coordinate the activities of millions of strangers. Self-interest becomes socially useful when it operates through voluntary exchange, competition, law, and reputation. A merchant who cheats customers may earn money once, but lose future business. A company that mistreats suppliers may struggle to find reliable partners. Trust reduces the cost of exchange because people do not need to investigate or enforce every promise constantly. Smith did not believe human beings are motivated only by money. In his earlier work, The Theory of Moral Sentiments, he wrote about sympathy, morality, approval, and social judgment. In The Wealth of Nations, he focuses more specifically on how economic exchange functions among people who may not know one another personally. Markets transform private motivations into coordinated production. But this process can fail when one side has excessive power, information is hidden, or competition is absent. A monopolist can raise prices. Employers may cooperate to hold down wages. Merchants may demand laws protecting them from rivals. Self-interest is therefore a force that must be channeled, not worshipped. Markets work best when individuals can pursue their goals while rules prevent fraud, coercion, and privileged control. Blink 5. Market prices move around underlying costs and competition. Smith distinguishes between a product's market price and what he calls its natural price. The market price is the amount actually paid at a particular moment. It can rise or fall depending on supply and demand. If a poor harvest creates a shortage of grain, the market price may increase sharply. If producers supply more cloth than consumers want, the price may fall. The natural price is the level that normally covers the wages of workers, the profit expected by those who invest capital, and the rent paid to landowners where relevant. Smith treats it as a central level around which market prices tend to move. When a product's market price remains unusually high, producers see an opportunity. Existing firms expand, new competitors enter, supply increases, pushing the price downward. When the market price remains too low, producers lose money. Some reduce output or leave the market. Supply falls, allowing the price to recover. Competition therefore reallocates labor and capital. Resources move toward activities offering stronger returns and away from those producing persistent losses. This adjustment is not immediate or painless. Workers cannot always change occupations quickly. Factories cannot instantly produce different goods. Information is incomplete. Legal restrictions and monopolies may prevent entry. Prices can remain distorted for long periods. Still, Smith sees prices as signals. A high price communicates scarcity or strong demand. A low price communicates abundance or weak demand. No central planner needs to instruct every producer exactly what quantity to make. Millions of decisions respond to changing prices. The system works best when competition is real. A protected monopoly can maintain prices above the competitive level because customers have no alternative. Smith therefore distrusted companies that asked governments for exclusive privileges. The market's coordinating power comes not from business freedom alone, but from the freedom of competitors and consumers to challenge existing producers. Blink 6. Wages, profits, and rent divide the income created by production. Smith divides much economic income into three broad categories. Workers receive wages. Owners of capital receive profits. Landowners receive rent. These groups benefit from production in different ways and may have conflicting interests. Wages are influenced by the demand for labor, the cost of living, worker skills, bargaining power, and the pace of economic growth. Smith believed wages could rise when an economy expanded rapidly because employers competed for workers. A rich but stagnant society might offer fewer opportunities than a less wealthy country growing quickly. He also recognized an imbalance in bargaining power. Employers are fewer in number and usually possess more savings. They can survive longer without an agreement. Workers often need income immediately. This makes it easier for employers to coordinate informally and hold wages down. Profit compensates those who advance capital and accept business risk. An entrepreneur may pay wages and purchase materials months before receiving money from customers. Without the expectation of profit, capital would be less likely to enter the activity. However, unusually high profits often indicate weak competition, privileged access, or scarcity. Smith did not assume that business owners' interests always match the public interest. Rent arises because land is limited and some locations or soils are more valuable than others. A landlord may receive income partly because ownership provides control over a scarce resource. As an economy grows, demand for land can increase even when the owner contributes little additional effort. Smith's analysis shows that economic growth does not distribute rewards automatically or equally. Different groups possess different forms of power. Policies benefiting merchants may harm consumers. Higher rents may absorb part of rising agricultural productivity. Wage growth depends not only on worker effort, but on broader demand and institutions. Understanding the economy, therefore, requires examining who receives the income created by production and why. Blink 7. Saving and capital investment support future growth. Production often requires resources before any final product can be sold. Workers need tools, factories need machinery, merchants need inventories, farmers need seed, animals, and equipment. Smith calls the accumulated resources supporting production stock or capital. Capital investment allows workers to become more productive. A construction worker with advanced machinery can accomplish more than one using only simple hand tools. A factory with better equipment can produce more goods with consistent quality. A merchant holding inventory can make products available when and where customers want them. Saving plays an important role because resources consumed immediately cannot also be invested. When part of society's income is preserved and directed toward productive activity, it can expand future output. Smith distinguishes productive labor from what he calls unproductive labor. His terminology can sound dismissive today. He generally describes labor as productive when it results in a saleable product or adds to an employer's capital. Services consumed immediately are treated differently. Modern economies demonstrate that services such as education, healthcare, software, and professional advice can create substantial long-term value even without producing physical goods. Still, Smith's broader question remains useful. Does spending increase future productive capacity, or does it disappear through immediate consumption? Capital must also be invested wisely. A grand project that customers do not value wastes resources. A protected company may absorb investment without becoming efficient. Financial systems influence where savings flow, but investors can make mistakes. Smith favors environments in which individuals bear meaningful consequences for their decisions, and capital can move toward more productive uses. Long-term growth requires more than working harder. It requires using part of today's output to develop the tools, skills, infrastructure, and organizations that make tomorrow's labor more productive. Blink 8. Free trade usually benefits consumers and improves resource use. Smith strongly criticized tariffs, import restrictions, and commercial monopolies designed to protect domestic producers. A household would not normally insist on making everything for itself when buying from a specialist is cheaper. Smith argues that nations should consider trade similarly. If another country can supply a product at a lower cost, importing it may free domestic labor and capital for activities in which they are more productive. Protection can preserve a domestic industry, but consumers pay through higher prices. Resources remain inside activities that may survive, mainly because competition has been blocked. The benefits are concentrated among protected producers, while the costs are spread across many consumers. This helps explain why protection can persist politically. A small group with much to gain has a strong incentive to lobby. Millions of consumers each pay a modest additional cost and may not organize against it. Smith was especially critical of merchants who presented their private interests as national interests. Businesses often praise competition in general while requesting protection for themselves. Smith did not demand the immediate removal of every trade barrier under all circumstances. He acknowledged national defense concerns and the difficulty of suddenly eliminating protections on which many workers had come to depend. Policy changes could be gradual. His larger argument is that trade should serve the public, not privileged companies. Imports are not evidence that a nation has lost. Consumers gain access to cheaper or better products. Exporters gain larger markets. Specialization can increase productivity on both sides. Trade creates adjustment costs, and some industries decline. The benefits may also be distributed unevenly. Smith's framework suggests that society should distinguish between helping affected workers adapt and permanently protecting inefficient producers from competition. The objective is not maximum trade for its own sake. It is to direct resources toward uses that create the greatest value. Blink 9. Government has essential duties that markets may not provide. Smith is often presented as an advocate of minimal government. He did oppose excessive regulation, monopolies, and economic planning designed to benefit privileged groups. But he assigned government several major responsibilities. The first is national defense. Protecting society from foreign attack is a public responsibility because individual citizens cannot organize national security effectively on their own. The second is justice. Property, contracts, and exchange require courts, law enforcement, and protection from violence and fraud. Markets cannot function reliably when powerful actors can seize property or ignore agreements without consequence. The third responsibility is public works and institutions that benefit society but may not generate enough private profit. Roads, bridges, harbors, and other infrastructure can expand markets and productivity. Education also receives significant attention. Smith worried that extreme division of labor could make workers perform the same simple task repeatedly, weakening intellectual curiosity and civic judgment. Basic education could help citizens develop the knowledge necessary for personal and political life. Smith sometimes supported user fees where practical, but he accepted public financing when broad benefits exceeded what private providers could capture. He also developed principles for taxation. Taxes should reflect people's ability to contribute. They should be clear rather than arbitrary. They should be collected at convenient times and designed to impose as little unnecessary burden as possible. Government, therefore, has both enabling and restraining roles. It supplies institutions markets need while preventing private groups from capturing public authority. The danger is not government alone or business alone. It is concentrated power used without accountability. Smith's preferred system requires a capable state strong enough to administer justice and public goods, but limited enough that merchants cannot use it easily to eliminate competition and enrich themselves at society's expense. Blink 10. Prosperity requires institutions that restrain concentrated power. Smith admired the productive power of markets, but he was suspicious of merchants and manufacturers when they acted collectively. People in the same trade often seek ways to raise prices or limit competition. Business owners may prefer a system that protects existing profits rather than one that maximizes innovation and consumer welfare. They may ask for tariffs, exclusive licenses, restrictive regulations, or colonial privileges. The public language may emphasize national strength. The practical result may be higher prices and reduced choice. Smith's criticism of colonial systems follows this logic. European empires often restricted colonies to trading with the imperial power. Protected merchants gained access to captive markets. The costs of defense and administration were shared by the broader public. Colonial trade could enrich particular companies while imposing military and financial burdens on the nation as a whole. Smith also understood that property and commercial development depend on stable institutions. Investors are more willing to commit capital when contracts are enforced. Workers are more productive when they expect to benefit from their effort. Trade expands when transport is safe and laws are predictable. Economic freedom, therefore, does not mean the absence of institutions. It means that rules are general, transparent, and not designed mainly for the benefit of a privileged group. Smith's broader vision combines competition, specialization, justice, education, infrastructure, and limits on political favoritism. No single mechanism guarantees prosperity. Markets can coordinate complex activity, but they can also be distorted. Government can provide public goods, but it can also be captured. Business can create innovations, but established firms may try to prevent newcomers from challenging them. A healthy economy requires continual attention to these tensions. The most important question is not whether the state or the market should control everything. It is which arrangement encourages productive effort, open competition, public benefit, and the widest improvement in living standards. Key takeaways from the book. The Wealth of Nations argues that prosperity comes from productive capacity, specialization, exchange, and capital investment, not from hoarding gold. Competition and prices help coordinate economic activity, but monopolies and political favoritism can distort markets. Smith supports trade while also assigning government essential roles in justice, defense, infrastructure, education, and taxation. The book's central lesson is that markets create broad wealth only when institutions preserve competition and prevent concentrated interests from controlling the economy.